Baha'u'llah was imprisoned for 4 months in Tehran. The name of the prison was called Siyachal, which means black pit. It was originally a reservoir of water, but was now being used as an underground dungeon where all the worst criminals were sent. For Baha'u'llah to reach the prison, he had to go down a dark passageway and then through 3 flights of stairs. It was icy cold, there were no windows, there was a horrible smell. Nearly 150 criminals were crowded in this dungeon. There was dirt and filth all over the floor. Rats and bugs were crawling everywhere. Under these horrible conditions, Baha'u'llah and several Babis were imprisoned. Their feet were in stocks, and they were all huddled together. Baha'u'llah taught the Babis several verses which they chanted. One row would chant, "God is sufficient unto me. He verily is the all-sufficing." Then the other row would reply, "In him let the trusting trust." Their voices could be heard in the early morning above ground, chanting these holy verses.
God is sufficient unto me. He verily is the all-sufficing. In him let the trusting trust. God is sufficient unto me. He verily is the all-sufficing. In him let the trusting trust. Sufficient unto me. He verily is the all-sufficing. In him let the trusting trust. God is sufficient unto me. He verily is the all-sufficing. In him let the trusting trust. Sufficient unto me. He verily is the all-sufficing. God is sufficient unto me. He verily is the all-sufficing. God is sufficient unto me. He verily is the all-sufficing. In him let the trusting trust. God is sufficient unto me. He verily is the all-sufficing. In him let the trusting trust.
It was in the dark of that dungeon that Baha'u'llah saw the light of God shining in his own self. This is how he recounted those hours when he became conscious of his heavenly mission. During the days I lay in the prison of Tehran, though the galling weight of the chains and the stench-filled air allowed me but little sleep, Still, in those infrequent moments of slumber, I felt as if something lowed from the crown of my head over my breast, even as a mighty torrent that precipitated itself upon the earth from the summit of a lofty mountain. Every limb of my body would, as a result, be set afire. At such moments, my tongue recited what no man could bear to hear.
ای عاشقان روی جانان، غم فراق را به سرور وصال تبدیل نمایید و سم هجران را به شهد لقا بیامیزید. اگرچه تا حال عاشقان از پی معشوق دوان بودند و حبیبان از پی محبوب روان، در این ایام فضل سبحانی از غمام روحانی چنان احاطه فرموده که معشوق طلب عشاق می نماید و محبوب جویای احباب گشته. این فضل را غنیمت شمرید و این نعمت را کم نشمرید. نعمتهای باقیه را نگذارید و به اشیای فانی قانع نشوید. برقع از چشم قلب بردارید و پرده از بصر دل بردارید تا جمال دوست بی حجاب بینید و ندیده ببینید و نشنیده بشنوید. ای بلبلان فانی، در گلزار باغی گلی شکفته که همه گلها نزدش چون خار و جوهر جمال نزدش بی مقدار. پس از جان بخروشید و از دل بسروشید و از روان بنوشید و از تن بکوشید که شاید به بوستان وصال درآیید و از گل بی مثال ببویید و از لقای بی زوال حصه برید و از این نسیم خوش صحبای معنوی غافل نشوید و از این رائحه قدس روحانی بی نصیب نمانی.
Magnified, O Lord my God, be thy name, whereby the trees of the garden of thy revelation have been clad with verdure, and been made to yield the fruits of holiness during this springtime. when the sweet savors of thy favors and blessings have been wafted over all things and caused them to bring forth whatsoever had been preordained for them in the kingdom of thine irrevocable decree, and the heaven of thine immutable purpose. I beseech thee by this very name not to suffer me to be far from the court of thy holiness, nor debarred from the exalted sanctuary of thy unity and oneness. Ignite then, O my God, within my breast the fire of thy love, that its flame may burn up all else except my remembrance of thee. That very trace of corrupt desire may be entirely mortified within me, and the naught may remain except the glorification of thy transcendent and all glorious being. This is my highest aspiration, mine ardent desire. O thou, who rulest all things, and in the whose hand is the kingdom of the entire creation, thou verily doest what thou choosest. No God is there beside thee, the Almighty, the All-Glorious, the Ever-Forgiving, Baha'u'llah.
This event signalizes the commencement of the period during which Baha'u'llah declared his mission to his companions. In a tablet, he refers to his declaration as the day of supreme felicity, and he describes the Garden of Ridván as the spot from which he shed upon the whole of creation the splendors of his name, the All-Merciful. Baha'u'llah spent 12 days in the garden prior to departing for Istanbul, the place to which he had been banished. The declaration of Baha'u'llah is celebrated annually by the 12-day Ridván festival, described by Shoghi Effendi as the holiest and most significant of all Baha'i festivals.
1863. The influence of Baha'u'llah and his teachings continues to infuriate the Persian authorities. At their urging, the Ottoman Sultan exiles him farther still from his native land. Before departing Baghdad, Baha'u'llah gathers his companions for 12 days in a garden called Ridván on the Tigris River. It is here, with his tent pitched along the rose-lined pathways, that Baha'u'llah proclaims publicly for the first time that he is the promised messenger of God for this day. In this moment, a new era in human history begins. Everything would change. The magnitude of the transformation called for by Baha'u'llah is hinted at in some of the words he speaks regarding these days. That which was hidden is now revealed, and that which was concealed is now come. Bestir yourselves to greet this day, a day whereon the gates of heaven have been flung open, and the clouds of eternity have rained down. His words release a tidal wave of spiritual energy, whose effects will extend across countless generations into the future.
The great expressions of love and devotion for Baha'u'llah were not confined to the Baha'i community in Iraq. The love and admiration of the people for Baha'u'llah was fully demonstrated on the day of his departure from his most great house in Baghdad. Then his majesty and greatness were evident to both friend and foe. The news of his forthcoming departure for Constantinople had spread rapidly among the inhabitants of Baghdad and its neighboring towns, and large numbers wished to attain his presence and pay their last tributes to him. But soon it became apparent that his house was too small for the purpose. Arrangements were made for Baha'u'llah to proceed to the garden park of Nazjabiyah. This beautiful garden, designated by his followers as the Garden of Ridván, the Garden of Paradise, was situated on the outskirts of Baghdad, across the river from his house. The departure of Baha'u'llah from his house witnessed a commotion the likes of which the people of Baghdad had never seen. People of all classes, of all walks of life, crowded the streets and even upon the rooftops situated along his route to the river. They were weeping and lamenting the departure of one who for a decade had imparted to them the warmth of his love and the radiance of his spirit. One who had been a refuge and a guide for them all. Upon arrival to the Garden of Ridván, there Baha'u'llah appeared in the utmost joy, walking magnificently through its flower-lined avenues among its trees. The fragrance of the roses and the singing of the nightingales created an atmosphere of beauty and enchantment. Every day at the hour of dawn, the gardeners would pick the roses which lined the 4 avenues of the garden and would pile them in the center of the floor of his blessed tent. So great would be the heat that when his companions gathered for their morning tea, they could barely see each other. These roses, with his own hand, he would entrust them to be delivered to the friends in the city. One night stands out and was recounted by one of the friends in the garden, who happened to be one of those who kept watch beside his blessed tent. And in the following manner he said, "As the hour of midnight approached, I saw him issue forth from his tent and pass by where some of his companions were sleeping, and he began to pace up and down through the moonlit and flower-bordered avenues of the garden. So loud was the singing of the nightingales on every side that only those who were near him could hear him distinctly. He continued to walk until, pausing in the midst of one of these avenues, he observed, 'Consider these nightingales. So great is their love for these roses that sleepless from dusk till dawn, they warble their melodies and commune with burning passion with the object of their adoration. How then can those who claim to be afire with the rose-like beauty of the beloved choose to sleep?' Baha'u'llah's companions had for some time known the declaration of his station to be imminent. This realization came to them not only as a result of many remarks and allusions made by him during the last few months of his sojourn in Baghdad, but also through a noticeable change in his demeanor. Another sign which unmistakably pointed to this approaching hour was his adoption, on the day of his departure from his house in Baghdad, of a different style of headdress, known as taj, a tall felt hat, which he wore throughout the rest of his ministry. Abdu'l-Baha has described how, upon his arrival in the garden, Baha'u'llah declared his station to those of his companions who were present, and he announced with great joy the inauguration of the festival of Ridván. Sadness and grief vanished, and the believers were filled with delight. Although Baha'u'llah was being exiled to far-off lands, and although he knew the sufferings and tribulations that were in store for him and his followers, yet through this historic declaration, he changed all sorrow into blissful joy and spent the most delightful time of his ministry in the Garden of Ridván. Indeed, in one of his tablets, he referred to the first day of Ridván as the day of supreme felicity and called on his followers to rejoice with exceeding gladness in remembrance of that day.
Nightingales sing a cry from the heart. They yearn for the roses, warbling in the dark. Journey to the garden, a king on the waves. The nightingales rejoice and sing out in praise. An exile with his sons, those sacred lives. 12 days they would stay to say their goodbyes. He walks out from his tent and strolls through the night. The Ridván has come. Hundreds would come to bid farewell. Take comfort in his words, a tablet for everyone, and listen to him at night under moonlit skies, chanting the verses in the garden of paradise. The world is longing, the heavens are calling, Spirit is gathering forth. Come with me, oh my dearest friend, let me take you down to his garden, across the water of mystery, to the shores of divinity. Countless souls come to say goodbye. Hear him chanting under the night sky, the words that fall from his ancient tongue. Oh, and now springtime has come. Come with me, oh my dearest friend, let me take you down to his garden, across the water of mystery, to the shores of divinity. Countless souls come to say goodbye. Hear him chanting under the night sky, words that fall from his ancient tongue. Oh, and now springtime has come. Come with me, oh my dearest friend, let me take you down to his garden, across the water of mystery, to the shores of divinity. Countless souls come to say goodbye. Hear him chanting under the night sky, words that fall from his ancient tongue. Oh, and now springtime has come.
He is the ever-abiding. It is the festival of Ridván, the vernal season wherein the beauty of the All-Glorious was revealed betwixt earth and heaven. In this wondrous day the gates of paradise were flung open before the faces of all people. At the behest of him who is the all-praised, and the outpourings of divine mercy rain down from the clouds of the celestial favor upon his countless embodiments and manifestations in the world of being. Baha'u'llah.
Arise and proclaim unto the entire creation the tidings that he who is the all-merciful hath directed his steps towards the Ridván and entered it. Guide then the people unto the garden of delight, which God hath made the throne of his paradise. We have chosen thee to be our most mighty trumpet, whose blast is to signalize the resurrection of all mankind. Say, this is the paradise on whose foliage the wine of utterance hath imprinted the testimony. He that was hidden from the eyes of men is revealed, girded with sovereignty and power. This is the paradise, the rustling of whose leaves proclaim, O ye that inhabit the heavens and the earth, there hath appeared what hath never previously appeared. He who from everlasting had concealed his face from the sight of creation is now come.
Hallelujah, baha'u'llah. Hallelujah, totoza. Hallelujah, baha'u'llah. Hallelujah, totoza. Alawapa, baha'u'llah. Alawapa, totoza. Alawapa, baha'u'llah. Alawapa, totoza. Ulula, yahukoto. Wena, nekriniso. Wazo zonke izipona masasasa ngemvunulo yobukoto wena eqiniso umnini wazo zonke izipona masasasa. Hallelujah, baha'u'llah. Hallelujah, totoza. Hallelujah, baha'u'llah. Hallelujah, totoza. Alawapa, baha'u'llah. Alawapa, totoza. Alawapa, baha'u'llah. Alawapa, totoza. Ulungulu wami. Florisa, ikandala. Gomkele, bubulungisa. Neshafu, malayami. Gemvunulo, yobukoto. Wena, eqiniso. Umnini, wazo zonke izipona masasasa. Hallelujah, baha'u'llah. Hallelujah, totoza. Hallelujah, baha'u'llah. Hallelujah, totoza. Alawapa, baha'u'llah. Alawapa, totoza. Alawapa, baha'u'llah. Alawapa, totoza. Alawapa, baha'u'llah. Alawapa, totoza.